Good evening, class, and welcome to Chapter 1, Introduction to Excel. Tonight we'll be going to cover the first section of the Introduction to Excel as part of Chapter 1, Introduction to Spreadsheets. As part of the Introduction to Spreadsheets, I want to go ahead and cover some of the basic nomenclature of the spreadsheet, the workbook that is comprised as part of the Excel program. So you'll see this particular layout of the screen once you open up Microsoft Excel 2016. And before we get too far into it, I want to go ahead just over some definitions. You notice up at the top you have Book 1. This is the default file name for the workbook. And a workbook is defined as a collection of one or more related worksheets contained within a single file. So once you save this particular file to a specific file name, you have created a workbook. A worksheet is a single spreadsheet that contains descriptive labels, numeric values, formulas, functions, and graphical representations of data. And by definition, a spreadsheet is an electronic file that contains a grid of columns and rows used to organize related data and to display results of calculations enabling interpretation of quantitative data for decision making. So while we have this Excel workbook and worksheet open, let's go ahead and cover some of the elements within the Excel window. So the first element I want to cover is the name box. And if you look where I have my cursor, it gives the description or the title of name box there. You'll notice that it has a 1 referenced in there that is in reference to the current cell. Again, this is an element located below the ribbon and displays the address of the active cell. Use the name box to go to a cell, assign a name to one or more cells, or select a function within the cell. Next to the name box is the cancel button. When you enter or edit data and click on the cancel button, you will cancel the data entry or edit and revert back to the previous data in the cell. So this is more or less an undo button. To the right of the cancel button is the enter button. When you enter or edit data and click enter, this will accept the data typed into the active cell and keep the current cell active. Enter changes from gray to blue when you position the pointer over it. To the right of the enter button is the insert function. Use this particular button to go ahead and display the insert function dialog box. And this is where you go ahead and select a mathematical or text function to go ahead and modify data that you're going to enter into the cell. We'll get into more of that later on into the course, but this is where you would go to actually create and insert the function into the active cell. To the right of the insert function button is the formula bar. This is the element that shows the contents of the active cell. So as you enter or edit information, you click within the formula bar, type in your text, and we're just going to put in some random text in there. And once we click enter, it will show, based off what we entered in there, into the cell that we selected, A1. Column headings. In a spreadsheet, you'll see at the top that there are columns indicated, A, B, C, D, and so forth. To the left, you'll see that there are rows with numbers in them for identification of cells and rows. So how Excel works is through the cells created by the columns and the rows that are referenced according to what you select. So for this particular cell, I'm in column C, row 3. You look in the name box, it references that particular column accordingly. Down towards the bottom, we're going to cover some of the additional components here specific to the workbook and the worksheet itself. You'll notice down here at the bottom you have the current sheet name. This is the active sheet that we're using. If you right click on that, you can do various things to this. You can delete the worksheet, you can rename it to whatever you want the sheet to be referenced as. Click enter to accept the edits, and that is how you go ahead and define your sheet names. To the right of that, you'll notice there is a plus button. When you click on, when you highlight over the button, you'll notice it gives you a little drop-down menu that gives a description of what that button does. This creates a new worksheet, and it defaults the name of the worksheet to however many sheets are in this workbook. So for this particular one, we had sheet 1. This is now sheet 2. Again, you can go in here and rename however you want. The sheet navigation tab is just over here to the left of your furthermost sheet. If you go ahead and notice here, there is a left and a right arrow. By clicking on the first worksheet and clicking on the right arrow, you should then move over to the next sheet. If you have more sheets where you do not have visibility, again, I pulled the status bar over to where it cuts off the second sheet. Now my arrow becomes active. I can then move over to see what this worksheet name is, and then the left sheet to move back. In addition to that, down here at the bottom you have your zoom feature. Again, you can use this to zoom in, zoom out, increase the size of your worksheet for however you need. Alright, after covering some of the basic components of the worksheet itself, let's get into the identification of columns and rows and cells. So I did briefly cover the reference of the columns and the rows and how they're identified within the worksheet, and we'll work through further defining that, as well as going through some navigation within the worksheet itself. So a worksheet contains columns and rows, with each column and row assigned a heading. Columns are assigned alphabetically, and rows are assigned numerically. Columns are referenced from A to Z, continuing from AA to AZ, and then from BA to BZ all the way until X, F, and D, which is the last possible of 16,384 columns. As I mentioned before, rows have numeric headings ranging from 1 to 1,048,576. So depending on how your screen resolution is, how your zoom settings are, will determine how many rows and how many columns are visible to you. The intersection of a column and a row is called the cell. So again, as I mentioned before, if we click in cell E6, you'll notice in the name box we're in column E and row 6. It's referenced that way in the name box. And the contents of that active cell or formula, if there were any, would be displayed up here in the formula bar. So again, quick overview of cells, of columns and rows as they are apparent in the Excel spreadsheet. Moving on to navigation among worksheets. There are a series of keystrokes that you can use in order to navigate within the worksheet. So the first one, again, is your arrows. If you move arrow up when clicked into a cell, it will actually move up one cell from your current position. Moving down will again move the cursor back down. You can go left and right through using the arrow keys on your keyboard. Using the tab key, you can move the active cell one to the right within the same row, and then the page up and the page down. Page down goes down one page, remaining in the same column. Page up again goes up one page from your current position. To move the active cell to column A in any row, you would go ahead and hit the home key. So I'm in row 4. I hit the home key and I move to cell A4. If I click my cursor into D13, and I hold down the control key and press home, it will actually take me to the top leftmost cell A1, which is the beginning of the worksheet. If I click Control End, it will take me to the rightmost, lowermost active corner of the worksheet, the intersection of the last column and the row that contains data in the active cell. It does not move down to the very bottom, so for that to work, I would need to type in some data. We're typing it in E9. We're going to move our active cell back up to A1 by hitting Control and End. I now move back to E9. It takes me to the last row, the last column in my active worksheet. And the last keystroke and action that I want to cover here is F5 or Control G, which will actually give you the Go To dialog box. That is where you can actually enter in wherever column and row reference you want to go to. So we want to go back to the topmost. We're going to click A1, click OK, and again that takes us back up to the topmost, leftmost row and cell in the worksheet. So for now, that is a quick overview, the introduction to the spreadsheets. I would go ahead and recommend continue reading through the first section of the intro to spreadsheets, part of chapter 1. And as you work through that, go ahead and proceed on with some of the hands-on exercises that you see on page 79.